So this is the dermatology talk of the CFC Family Conference 2013. Um, I'm Dr. Kawamura. I'm a dermatologist from Brazil, and have always been very interested in genetics. So I started working with genetics after my residency training, and was fascinated by this group of of what we now call rhizopathies, and the way in which they had so many skin presentations, and very curious about why exactly they happen and what we can do to help the kids. So since 94, so this is a list of skin findings, dermatologic findings that I put together in 2002. And this was based on cases that had been published and my personal observation of CFC patients in Brazil. As you can see, the list is very long. You don't really find lists as long as this if they're not described by dermatologists, because people tend to, other specialists just tend to group things. It makes sense, and we can actually treat some of these things the same way. So let me show you one. So this is the list that was published in 2012 of skin involvement in 186 CFC patients. So the most common feature was the curly and/or sparse hair that was found in 90% of the CFC kids, followed closed by the absent or sparse eyebrows in 80%. And now, if we try to put together what we're going to see now and what you heard about the genes that are mutated in CFC syndrome, and what exactly is going on, why is it that it all happens, and how is that communication between the cells affecting the skin, we find we can group all those lesions in the areas that are listed here. So in the hair, we see differences in the hair structure, in the hair cycle, and we're going to talk about this later. We find differences in the way in which the keratin is presented, and then keratosis that can be keratosis pilaris if this excessive amount of keratin is present around the hair follicles. Hyperkeratosis in general, because you can actually have the hyperkeratosis in other areas, not just around the follicles. And palmoplantar keratosis, which is the hyperkeratosis present on the palms and soles. Pigmentation is also affected, and then we have lots of patients that have a bigger amount of moles than you would expect in the general population, and as well as generalized hyperpigmentation. A little bit of what we're supposed to find in the normal skin. So the red area here. Now, what exactly is happening when we see follicular keratosis or keratosis pilaris? So this is, again, a drawing like the one you saw before with the epidermis. This is what we call a hair follicle, and that's what we see in the skin. So when you look at all these little bumps here, that's what we saw in the previous slide. There should be a hair there. The hair is not coming out because of this plug of keratin, and it stays there. All of us, we will have a little bit of this in some areas of the body. It's very common to find this on the sides of the arms. But what we see in the rhizopathies is that it's much more. And many times it's everywhere, almost everywhere in the body, right? So that's what we call follicular keratosis. Now, this is an image of what normal skin is, right? Again, here is the epidermis, and this is the layer of keratin. This is what is to expect. This is the layer of cells that are captive that keeps dividing, gets to the top, dies, and forms the keratin. How different it is. Instead of having that layer of keratin that we saw in the previous slide, we have a much thicker and harder structure there that doesn't really allow what's being produced in the skin to come out. So that's why there's less sweat and there's less production, less delivery of fat to these areas. It just gets blocked. Normally, you only find this in teenagers. This is a different kind of picture. It's an enlarged picture. On the left-hand side, if you look at the bright spots, those bright spots are plugs of keratin. On the left-hand side, you have the interior part of the arm of a CFC child that has hyperkeratosis. On the right-hand side, you have the exterior. Now, what you would expect in somebody who doesn't have the hyperkeratosis is to have what you see on the left. This is to prove my point. So you don't really have friction in that area. You would expect lesions to be on the palms, not on this side of the hands. And you do see lots. This here, this here, this here, here. So the other thing that happens is something happens with the normal hair cycle. So I'm going to show you now what however, what we recommend is that these moles are treated just like in anybody else. It's not that because we haven't seen malignant transformation that we're not going to follow and watch carefully and remove lesions that we think that have a chance of having any different behavior. Now, the good question is, what is a bigger number of moles? And that's very hard to say. We can't really say a number. Now, if we classify pigmented lesions in many ways, and I'm going to give you what's important. However, if you have a pigmented lesion that is within the epidermis or that starts in the junction, in that layer of cells that keeps dividing, then there's a lot of activity there. And the chances that a lesion like that is going to at some point have a malignant transformation and become a skin cancer is high. So those are the lesions that we are looking for and trying to remove before a malignant transformation happens. Those are the called junction. This is what we call the lymphedema. Now, the lymphedema, we don't know why it happens. It's part of the things that have been observed in the kids. We normally see it in young adult teenagers and young adults. Cutis marmorata is another thing that's being described. It's what you see, this thing that looks like a marble. Everybody will see it in the skin if it's very cold. But what we see in some CFC patients is that you find this kind of skin pattern even if it's not so cold. There's nothing to be concerned about. It's not dangerous in any way. But it's a vascular alteration here that's observed in hemangiomas. Again, part of the vascular and lymphatic changes that we see in the skin due to the alterations that are caused by the mutated genes. I just wanted to point out that the ones, I think it's possible to see here, that this is elevated, meaning that this hemangioma is formed deep in the skin. And then our recommendations for when to look for a dermatologist and what to do with the skin lesions are for the management of the dry skin and itching. Dry skin and itching can be very disturbing, can affect the sleep pattern, can let the kid be very